Okay, so picture this. You sit down to play a board game. Let's say Monopoly. But the stakes are a little higher. Instead of fake money, you're playing for the entire U.S. economy.
Wow.
And healthcare for millions and, the future of the courts.
That sounds incredibly stressful.
Yeah.
I'm already sweating just thinking about it.
Right. Now imagine one player at the table. He's not the loudest guy. He's actually kind of quiet, soft-spoken.
Okay.
But every time it's his turn, he doesn't just roll the dice. He pulls out a pen and starts rewriting the instruction manual.
Oh.
He changes how the bank works. He changes how you get out of jail. And because of these little edits, he wins. He wins huge.
But there's a but, isn't there?
There's a big but. By the time the game is over, the board is flipped, pieces are missing, and nobody at the table trusts each other ever again. The game was won, but the game itself is broken.
That is a very vivid and honestly a pretty perfect analogy for the book we're covering today.
It really is. We are diving deep into The Game Changer, how Harry Reid remade the rules and showed Democrats how to fight by Jon Ralston. And look, I know Harry Reid might sound like dry history to some people.
A senator from Nevada who's not even in office anymore, yeah.
Exactly. But this book argues you literally cannot understand modern American politics, like right now, today, without understanding this one man.
I'd go a step further. Ralston is making the case that the very way Washington functions, or, dysfunctions today, is largely a house that Harry Reid built.
Yeah.
It's a story about the cost of winning.
Yes. And that's our mission for this deep dive. We're going to use our comprehensive book critique framework to really take this apart. We'll look at the evidence Ralston presents, but also apply some lenses, like the difference between being smart and being wise.
And the ethical price of changing the rules. It's that classic question. If you have to burn down the village to save it, are you a hero or
An arsonist.
An arsonist, yeah.
So before we get into the arson, let's talk about the witness. Who is Jon Ralston? Because this isn't just some biography written 50 years later.
No, and that's so crucial to the tone of the book. Ralston is the insider's insider. He's the CEO of the Nevada Independent, and he has spent over 35 years covering Nevada politics. He didn't just research Reid. He watched the machine being built in real time.
He was there. He took the angry phone calls.
He sat in the press scrums. So when he describes Reid as ruthless, it's not just speculation. It's firsthand testimony. He's not writing a hagiography, treating Reid like a saint.
No.
It's more like a forensic accounting of power. He clearly respects Reid's skill, but he does not shy away from the ugly stuff.
Let's get into that power. The book makes a massive claim right up front. Ralston argues that Harry Reid produced some of the most groundbreaking legislation of the late 20th century. I mean, bugger than LBJ, that feels like a stretch.
It does sound like hyperbole until Ralston lays out the receipts. You have to remember the context. Reid was the Senate Majority Leader during the early Obama years.
Right.
We're talking about the passing of the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare.
Which, let's be honest, people forget how hard that was to pass. It wasn't some victory lap. It was a trench war.
It was a miracle of legislative plumbing. And then you have Dodd-Frank, the financial regulations after the 2008 crash, and that massive economic stimulus package.
Yeah.
Ralston's point is that none of this happens just because people had good intentions. It happened because Harry Reid knew how to count votes better than almost anyone.
There's a specific example in the book that really highlights this ruthless tactical innovation, the story of Arlen Specter.
Yes, this is a masterclass in political maneuvering. So the Democrats needed 60 votes to break a filibuster and get their agenda through. They were stuck at 59.
It's one short.
And Arlen Specter was a Republican senator from Pennsylvania.
A Republican.
A Republican.
Yeah.
And Reid didn't just ask him nicely to vote with them. He orchestrated a party switch. He convinced a sitting Republican senator to defect to the Democrats just to get them that magic number 60. It's the kind of move that changes history. Ralston details how Reid partnered with Nancy Pelosi to just grind these bills out. It wasn't about soaring rhetoric. Obama did the speeches.
Reid did the knee-breaking.
Reid did the knee-breaking. And it wasn't just in D.C., right? The book spends a lot of time on his home turf.
Yeah, because before he was Senator Reid, he was basically the guy running Nevada.
That might be his most durable legacy.
Yeah.
Ralston describes how Reid took Nevada, which was historically a pretty reliable red state, and turned it into a blue fortress. He built this political machine that is, in Ralston's words, unmatched.
The example that really stuck with me, and I'd love for you to break this down, is Yucca Mountain. This feels like the ultimate don't mess with Harry story.
It really is. So for decades, The federal government, Congress, the president, everybody, had decided that Yucca Mountain in Nevada was going to be the dumping ground for the nation's nuclear waste.
More done deal.
It was a done deal. Billions of dollars spent. It's hard to fight the entire federal government.
Usually impossible.
But Reid just strangled it. He didn't have the votes to kill it openly. So he used procedural warfare. He cut funding here, blocked an appointment there.
Sand in the gears.
Just threw sand in the gears year after year after year until the whole project just died.
That's that general welfare aspect, right? If you're a Nevadan, he's a hero. He protected his state.
Absolutely. If you live in Las Vegas, you're cheering.
Yeah.
But, and this is the pivot of the entire book, Ralston asks us to look at the methods. When does protecting your state cross the line into breaking the system?
And this leads us directly to the elephant in the room, or maybe the donkey in the room, the nuclear option.
The nuclear option. This is the climax of Ralston's whole argument.
Walk us through this, because I think a lot of people hear that term and think of weapons, but in the Senate, it's about rules. What happened in 2013?
Okay, so to get this, you have to understand the filibuster. For a long, long time, the Senate operated on a norm that you needed 60 votes to end debate and confirm a judge. It meant the minority party had a say.
You had to compromise. You couldn't just ram a nominee through with 51 votes. You needed some buy-in from the other side.
Correct. But by 2013, the Republican minority was blocking President Obama's nominees at a historic rate. They were basically just leaving seats empty.
So let me play devil's advocate here for a second. If the Republicans were just saying no to everything, didn't Reid have to do something? I mean, if the car is stalled, don't you have to hotwire it?
That is exactly Reid's argument, and Ralston gives it fair weight. Reid felt he had no choice. He felt the institution was being held hostage. So he invoked the nuclear option. He changed the Senate rules with a simple majority vote.
And what did that change do?
It eliminated the filibuster for executive nominees and all lower court judges. So suddenly, you only needed 51 votes.
And it worked.
Immediately it worked. The logjam broke. Obama's judges got confirmed. Democrats cheered. Reid looked like a tactical genius.
I feel a very large butt coming.
It's a massive but. This brings us to a concept we like to discuss, which Ralston really illuminates here. The difference between knowledge and wisdom.
Okay, break that down through this Adlerian lens, knowledge versus wisdom here.
So knowledge is knowing how to change the rules to get what you want right now. Reid had that. He knew the procedure to strip the minority of their power.
And understanding is?
Understanding is seeing the immediate cause and effect. I change this rule, my judges get confirmed. Simple.
Okay, so where was the wisdom deficit?
Wisdom is seeing what happens after you win. Wisdom is realizing that once you break a seal, it stays broken. And Ralston connects the dots to the tragedy that followed.
Oh, boy.
By using the nuclear option for lower court judges in 2013, Reid established the precedent that a simple majority could change the rules whenever it wanted.
And then the Republicans took the Senate.
Exactly. And when Donald Trump became president, they used the exact same precedent Harry Reid had set. But they expanded it to Supreme Court nominees.
Oh, man. So the tool Reid invented to save some district court judges was the same tool used to push through.
Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, all confirmed with simple majorities.
Wow.
Ralston's argument, and it's hard to argue against it, is that if Reid hadn't changed the game in 2013, Mitch McConnell might not have been able to do what he did in 2017.
That is the ultimate irony. Reid's great tactical victory paved the way for the Democrats' biggest strategic defeat in a generation.
It's a be careful what you wish for horror story. He won the battle, but handed his opponents the weapon they used to win the war. And that lack of foresight, that focus on the now, that is the wisdom deficit Ralston is pointing out.
It really makes you think about the golden rule, doesn't it? Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. It sounds like a Sunday school lesson, but in politics, it's actually a survival mechanism.
It is. And Ralston exposes a huge failure of reciprocity here. Because here's the thing. When Harry Reid was in the minority and Republicans threatened to change the filibuster, Reid screamed bloody murder.
What did he say?
He called it the end of the Senate, un-American.
But when the shoe was on the other foot,
he did the exact same thing he had condemned. He didn't treat the minority the way he wanted to be treated when he was the minority. And that double standard is just, it's toxic.
It destroys the social contract. If the rules only apply when they help me, they aren't rules. They're just leverage.
Precisely. And Ralston notes that Reid's strategy became power over principle. But again, you have to grapple with the why. Ralston admits the Senate was already dysfunctional. The domestic tranquility was already evaporating.
Okay, let's use that. Let's use the preamble as a scorecard. Promote the general welfare and ensure domestic tranquility. How does Reid score on that?
It's a split decision, and that's what makes the book so compelling. On general welfare, Ralston gives him high marks. The ACA gave healthcare to millions. The stimulus probably saved the economy. Those are real, tangible goods.
But on domestic tranquility?
Oh, failing grade. Absolute failure. Because domestic tranquility implies a system where we can disagree without destroying the institution itself.
Hmm.
Ralston describes the Senate going from a deliberative body where people actually debated and compromised to a polarized battlefield where the goal was total destruction of the other side.
And Reid was a general in that war.
He was. He pioneered the permanent campaign. He used the Senate floor to attack private citizens like the Koch brothers. He escalated everything. So you get this trade-off. We got the legislation, but we lost the peace.
That raises a logical issue in Ralston's own argument, doesn't it? I noticed a bit of a contradiction. The book is titled How to Fight, almost like it's an instruction manual.
Yeah.
But then Ralston spends so much time lamenting how broken everything is.
You nailed it. That's the internal tension of the book. It's almost a special pleading fallacy. The narrative seems to suggest that rule-breaking is heroic when Reid does it for good causes, but it's dangerous when McConnell does it.
Right. It's the idea that I can punch you because I'm the good guy, but you can't punch me back because you're the bad guy.
Exactly. And logically, that doesn't hold up. If a tactic is valid, it's valid for everyone. If you normalize the nuclear option, you can't act surprised when the other side uses it. Ralston celebrates the game changer, but seems genuinely depressed by the new game he's describing.
It sounds like he respects the skill, the pure mechanics of how Reid operated, but he hates the result.
Which I think is a very honest place for a biographer to land. He isn't selling us a fairy tale, he's showing us how the sausage is made, and it is messy.
So, looking at the book as a whole, what's the verdict? What are the strengths of Ralston's account?
The strength is the access. Ralston knows where the bodies are buried because he was there when the graves were dug. If you want to understand the nuts and bolts of how power actually works, not the Schoolhouse Rock version, the real version, this is the definitive text.
And the weaknesses.
I do worry about the framing. By subtitling it, Show Democrats How to Fight, it risks romanticizing the very behavior that broke the system. It focuses so heavily on the short-term wins, while maybe downplaying the catastrophic long-term damage.
The ends justify the means trap.
Exactly. It's a bit of the fallacy of consequentialism, judging an action solely by its immediate outcome.
So we've unpacked the man, the machine, and the meltdown. Let's bring this deep dive in for a landing. For the listener trying to make sense of our current political chaos, what are the 3 key insights to take away from the game changer?
The first one has to be that reciprocity is fragile. Political norms, like the filibuster, they rely on a gentleman's agreement. They rely on everyone agreeing not to use the nuclear launch codes. Once you break that seal for your own benefit, you cannot put the genie back in the bottle.
You've just handed your opponent an unloaded weapon. That is a chilling thought. What's number 2?
Tactics are not wisdom. This is the core lesson of Reid's career. He was a tactical genius. He could win the news cycle. He could win the vote count today. But wisdom asks what that victory means for the country in 10 years. Reid excelled at the game, but he arguably failed at stewardship. He left the institution weaker than he found it.
And the third insight?
The double-edged sword. Every rule change you make to help your friends today will eventually be used by your enemies to hurt you tomorrow. The Senate is a long game. It's been around for centuries. Reid played it like a sprint to pass the Obama agenda, and we are living with the consequences of that speed, specifically in the makeup of the Supreme Court.
It really reframes how you look at the news today. When you see gridlock or nuclear options or just this fierce partisanship, you're seeing the echoes of choices made back in 2013.
Absolutely. If politics is just war by other means, then domestic tranquility becomes a fantasy.
And that leaves us with a big provocative question. If Harry Reid really did remake the rules, are we now stuck playing this broken game forever?
Now that is the question. Can you de-escalate? Can you rebuild norms once they've been completely shattered? Or is the trust so gone that ruthless pragmatism is the only way left to govern?
I don't know the answer, but I know understanding how we got here is the first step.
Without a doubt.
That's it for our deep dive into The Game Changer. A huge thank you to Jon Ralston for writing such a complex and challenging book. And thank you, the listener, for sticking with us.
It was a pleasure.
We'll catch you on the next one. Stay curious.